Ladies and gentlemen, I ask you to take your seats. We're going to begin. I want to welcome all of you, all of our distinguished guests and ministers to the Sanitation and Water for All Finance Ministers meeting. And I just want to share a couple announcements with you before we start to make sure things go as smoothly as possible. Once the opening speeches have been concluded, we'll have a slight change in chairs up here, and it should be very brief, so I'd ask everyone to remain seated, and we'll be very quick about that. I'd like to ask all of you to silence your mobile phones and any other electronic devices you have, and please note that there's no still or video photography aside from the official media that are here. Now, I would like to ask everybody, do we have the photographer? We do up here. We're going to do a quick family photo. If everyone could look in this direction. Great. Okay, thanks everybody. So today we'll be having the in-depth discussion on how to close the financing gap for water and sanitation, and I hope it will be a productive meeting. I'm going to hand the floor over first to the World Bank Group President, Yong Kim. Jim, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Laura, and thanks everybody. And honorable ministers, it's great to be here. I want to thank everyone for being here today, and I also want to beg your patience, because this is a pretty technical, as we say, nerdy little talk about water. But I want to get into some of the details about how we're thinking about financing water going into the future. Very happy to be here with Amina, Mohammed, my very good friend, who's now Deputy Secretary General of the entire United Nations. My friend Tony, Kevin Rudd, everybody, and it's great to have Matt here, and we really want to thank him for his commitment to this cause. And so I want to welcome all of you to the bank for this extremely important meeting. And let me just start by saying that very early on, Rachel Kite, who's worked with us for years on climate change, said that while carbon will be the currency of climate change, water will be the teeth. And we're seeing it everywhere. The crisis around water is just as serious as you could imagine, and the knock-on effects on so many other aspects of human well-being are tremendous. For me, this is fundamentally a moral issue. The UN's recognized that access to clean water is a human right. But it's also an issue with a very large economic impact. Some $260 billion are lost annually. This is 1.5% of GDP. We have to recognize that efforts under the Millennium Development Goals were notable, and we did make some progress. But meeting the Sustainable Development Goals will require a fundamental change in the way that we approach access to water. We're going to have to really think creatively about mobilizing new sources of finance, because today, public and concessional resources will only fund about a third of the total need, and therefore private sector investment will have to grow, because right now it's really minimal. We have to focus, we believe, on two critical issues. The first is, how can we use existing resources more effectively and make service providers more efficient in using their own financial and technical resources, while also operating under more transparent governance arrangements? So there's some specific recommendations. First of all, tariffs should cover operating expenses, and where this is not expenses and where it's not happening, tax revenue should supplement these resources. But many service providers are simply not operating efficiently and need to use their scarce tax and tariff revenues more productively. Without revenue and efficiency improvements, any new funding for the sector could potentially just be wasted. The second question is, how do we implement this kind of transition to tap additional sources of financing, particularly domestic private resources? We recognize the need to increase public and donor financing for projects. But right now, there are trillions of dollars sitting on the sidelines earning little in return, and investors are looking for higher returns. Now, if you just add up all the money that's sitting with Japan, Germany, and the European Central Bank in negative interest rate bonds, that's already trillions of dollars where people are literally paying Germany, Japan, and the European Central Bank to hold their money for them. They're not getting a return. They're paying them to hold their money for them. And so we think that this is absolutely the right time to begin mobilizing some of that capital for the purpose of giving people access to water. Now, we'll go into more detail about what this means, so have patience, please. So, accessing international finance in the water sector is a challenge, given the long-term nature of water-related infrastructure, revenues that are often in the local currency, and service providers that are predominantly local. Tapping into local capital, despite the challenges, could be a long-term solution that we have to explore very aggressively. Now, this is a new paradigm, and there have been many critiques when I have talked about private resources for the use of increasing access to water. And so we're not saying that we can jump into this transition quickly. There are many steps that we have to go through. But we're envisioning an approach that uses credit enhancement like guarantees and blending public and concessional funds with private finance to bring in the capital. And I just would remind you, public and concessional resources cover a third of the needed capital for providing water to everyone. Now, I want to be clear about this. We're not suggesting that we go back to what I have called the bad old days of privatization. I actually, many of you may know, I participated in demonstrations to close the World Bank. And part of the critique was the privatization that was happening. So I want to be clear. Bringing private capital to fund water-related infrastructure is not the same as the privatization of the sector. In fact, we're agnostic about ownership, but ownership can absolutely remain in the hands of the government. But if we do it the right way, private capital can encourage improved public management, control, and implementation of water services. We're not just talking about bonds or long-term loans. In many countries, private financing is being channeled into the water sector through microfinance or vendor finance. The development partner community has an important role to play in bringing this capital, working closely with you, especially the ministers of finance. But this is not new. And anyone who has read the Addis Ababa report on financing for development, which Amina played a huge, important leadership role in, we laid this all out in that document in 2015. We realized that in order to go from the billions currently available to the trillions that were needed, we would have to find innovative ways to bring in private capital. Now, here's the key. That there exist institutions like ours, institutions like the UN, institutions like the UNICEF and Tony's group. There exist institutions that sit between the global market system, these sources of private capital, and the needs of developing countries and poor people. And we absolutely commit to continuing to play that role. The only way that this money should move is if we ensure that the priorities of governments and the prioritization of the needs of the poor is at the top of the list. But we know that we can set up arrangements where you will have these extraordinary win-win situations where holders of capital will get a higher return and the needs for water will be improved. I'm very thankful for being here. I want to thank the members of the high-level panel on water, and I especially want to thank all of you for remaining committed to this issue. We will work with you. We think that there are many opportunities to raise the kind of capital we need to provide clean water for everyone, and with champions like Matt Damon and the wonderful work that his organization water.org is doing, we think we can achieve that goal, and let's try to do it well before 2030. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Let me now invite UN Deputy Secretary General Amina Mohammed to offer some comments. Amina, please.
Thank you very much, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for having me at this important meeting. I did have the pleasure of attending this in 2014 with the former Secretary General and witnessing the collaboration with the bank and Sanitation and Water for All in person. So appreciate being invited in my new capacity and thank Jim and the bank for convening it. I do have to underscore the commitment and leadership that is needed for a subject like this, and often when we spoke about open defecation, we'll talk about other things that are uncomfortable, but all water so important to that, really is helpful to what we are doing now in the United Nations to talk across all sectors the critical efforts that are needed to meet the SDGs. And I think Jim talked about what a steep climb that is. There is huge ambition there, but even more ambition needed for the implementation. And today, I again had some very, very fruitful discussions with the Vice President in Latin America talking about water and the infrastructure needed to put an end to cholera in Haiti. And I know you're very close to that and have supported it for many years. I commend the SWA for being ahead of the curve and for recognizing that in 2010, that to improve access to water, sanitation and hygiene, civil society, governments, development partners and the private sector need to collaborate and work together. We saw that progress would not be made simply by just spending more money, but by spending scarce resources much more effectively and using the opportunity to leverage. And we have made progress, and more than 2 billion people have gained access to improved sanitation during the MDG period. Not enough, but the glass is some full. So we still have a lot more to do. And I know that we will have, as I see Tony sitting next to me, the statistics that will talk to the 2.4 billion that still have no proper toilet. And I would argue that no proper toilet, even those that have been provided, are still not good enough for our children and for our women. And that we still have 1 billion people that are defecating in open. SDG 6 on water and sanitation sets a very high bar, and it urging safely managed services for all. Those who still lack access are often the poorest and the most marginalized. The impacts on their lives are profound. They include women and girls who risk sexual assault due to the lack of safe facilities, and girls who miss several days in school each month when they're menstruating because no toilets are available to them. As former chair of the Water Supply and Sanitation Collaborative Council, and through its Leave No One Behind program, work on menstrual health management was incredible, and I saw it firsthand when I visited India, finding solutions to scale. And when you go to India, you see the scale of the problem, and that's really what we want to do. Further appreciating that while MHM is in itself essential to eliminating the discriminatory nature of school environment, where menstruating girls and their teachers cannot manage their periods with dignity in a safe and private environment, also the attendant effect on their education, health and general well-being, as well as the many women around the world that suffer in silence as a result of the cultural taboos surrounding menstruation. So really this does serve as a powerful and practical entry point towards addressing larger gender issues and promotes the empowerment of women. This reinforces the notion that SDG goals are not a set of goals where each goal should be viewed individually, but rather as a collective. And so when we see the attention being made on Goal 6, to see that really as a docking station for all other 16 goals and how it empowers others to see the interconnection of each goal. And ultimately, it is serving humanity. Other than inequality as one of the most important obstacles to achieving the global goals, another important lesson that I've taken away are the benefits of going deep and narrow versus shallow and wide in the face of global funding challenges, and striking a careful balance between the length of support to a community to achieve ODF status and prevent slippages. Shortly, I'm sure, as I said, you will hear from my colleague, and I'm calling him Uncle these days, Uncle Tony Lake. He will set out the magnitude of the challenge that we face. It is huge. The scale at which we have to go across the universal agenda is enormous. And he will make a compelling case for why access to water and improved sanitation is so important and why it should be a priority. The 2030 agenda challenges us to lift everyone everywhere. Progress on Goal 6 will support progress and many others, in particular health, education, nutrition, decent work, and the new urban agenda, where sustainable cities are going to grow hugely in the next few years. As finance ministers, you all have a critical role to play. And I know the efforts that we made to convince my finance minister, and she's sitting in the corner over there, so Kemi, Nigeria. In 2015, you not only agreed to the SDGs, but really also the Addis Ababa Action Plan. And getting behind that and seeing the importance of the investments that we need to make here are critical. Over the past 2 days, ministers have discussed how to do this and have come up with concrete ways forward, which we will hear about, and Jim has alluded to that. Next month, we will have an important meeting in New York to review financing for development outcomes and the means of implementation for the 2030 agenda. So I hope we will take some of the ideas that we have here and really further them. To ensure our financing commitments are applied to water and sanitation, we have to reinforce clear targets and monitor and review progress on a regular basis together. People need to see results. It will get us more investments if we can show success in what is a very difficult investment. These regular meetings of SWA, of finance ministers, offer a really important, valuable opportunity for this regular review and enhancing that challenge and that call to action for bringing in the investments in innovative ways. They also ensure that we stay on track to meet SDG 6. So thank you for having me here, but also for continuing to stay the course. Your leadership, Jim, is absolutely essential, exemplary in what we've done in a very difficult field. So thank you, and I look forward to being back here again next year.
Well done.
We'll look forward to that. Thank you, Amina. We will now hear from Swaziland Minister of Natural Resources and Energy, Jabulile Mashwama. Please.
Thank you very much. President Kim, Deputy Secretary General, and Mr. Damon, honorable ministers and ladies and gentlemen, it's truly my honor to present today on behalf of the SWA meeting the overview of what we did in the last 2 days. Drinking water, sanitation, and hygiene are essential to building healthy lives and strong economies. Over the past year and a half, the Sanitation and Water for All global partnership gathered together 38 ministers responsible for water, sanitation, and hygiene. Other participants included civil society, development partners, and private sector, and in total, there were 53 countries that were represented. Together, they addressed the challenges of achieving the Sustainable Development Goals, exchanged learning and solutions, and agreed on concrete action plans for developing and implementing robust national programs suitable for the investment of public funds, as well as for domestic and international commercial financing. This sector ministers' meeting was graciously convened by UNICEF on behalf of the SWA partnership and was hosted by the Pan American Health Organization panel. Ministers' discussions were anchored in the Sustainable Development Goals, which were specifically achieving safely managed water, sanitation, and hygiene for all, with leaving no one behind. The SDG targets are indeed ambitious and go beyond the basic level of service associated with the MDGs, but we firmly believe that they are achievable. The focus should be on leaving no one behind and moving everyone immediately to at least a basic level of service with quality, which is what we call the basic plus. This should be the priority, while we also move on to a higher benchmark of the safely managed services proposed in the SDGs. We also considered no regrets, low-cost actions to improve efficiency of the sector. We looked at 4 aspects of efficiency, which is operational, capital, financial, and pricing efficiencies. We heard from China and India in their success in rapidly increasing access to rural sanitation at scale. We also recognized their sustained political leadership, emphasis on local level engagement, and we noted the importance of holding people accountable for results. During this past year and a half, we engaged also in 3 ministerial dialogues on the following themes. The first one being achieving safely managed sanitation whilst leaving no one behind. And on that one, we noted that we have made progress on getting communities open defecation free, but we also need to scale this up. And we agreed that there needs to be a long-term support for communities to maintain the status and to move up the sanitation ladder towards the SDGs. Secondly, the second dialogue was on maintaining progress in the face of risks and vulnerabilities, including climate change and disasters. On this one, we recognized that the importance of setting up robust capacity and systems for preparedness and response with clear lines of accountability, for which many of our countries have this already. Financing these in innovative ways and bridging the gap between humanitarian response and recovery. And the third one of the dialogues was in progressing towards universality whilst addressing financial sustainability. We do hope that we'll expand on this discussion during this meeting here. The Ministerial Dialogues further provided an opportunity for recognizing shared challenges, learning from others' experiences, and considering how we could apply in our own national context. This, therefore, ladies and gentlemen, is what the sector ministers decided. Firstly, we said we will improve the efficiency of the sector and make it suitable for investment. We also will put in place the key building blocks for an effective sector that delivers results. We will also use our public resources to support the poorest and most vulnerable, to leverage investment from other sources, especially domestic and private capital. We will use support from development partners to build strong institutions and capacity. We welcomed the willingness of the partners from civil society and the private sector to support government-led national programs in line with the SWA collaborative behaviors. In this way, our sector will make a contribution to the overall economic development of our countries, as well as supporting key outcomes in health, education, and gender equality. And we will make sure that the limited public resources allocated to the sector are well used. Let me end, honorable colleagues, by saying that we know that we have a strong investment case. For example, research shows that for every dollar spent on sanitation, the return on investment is around $5. We would like to talk to you more about how we can realize this investment in each of our countries represented here. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Madam Minister. I would like now to turn to Water.org co-founder Matt Damon. Matt?
Thank you, everybody. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk to you about a global challenge that I'm dedicated to solving. My name is Matt Damon. I'm the co-founder of Water.org. And it is our goal to remove barriers between people and access to safe water and sanitation. One of the most significant barriers is sufficient capital. In over 25 years of working to deliver safe water and toilets, it has become clear to Water.org that while there are multiple approaches to solving the challenge of universal access, mobilizing capital is the most pressing and powerful potential solution. All of you, to one degree or another, deal with financing facilities and schemes to address the enormity of the water and sanitation challenge. You and your ministries grapple with the challenge of financing the water infrastructure needs to serve your constituencies. Along with that, you're confronted by the challenges of financing the maintenance of that infrastructure. So I won't stand before you and claim there's one silver bullet solution to the complexities of the issue. But I would urge you to consider the full breadth of financing options as you work to tackle this challenge. You provide the critical top-down financing to enable large-scale change. At Water.org, we've seen the power of bottom-up financing, household-level, last-mile finance. We believe solutions exist at the intersection of these two approaches. By complementing your macrofinance initiatives with microfinance, tens of thousands of financial institutions across the globe could be mobilized to assist you in closing the financing gap. I'd like to share a compelling approach to mobilizing capital. At Water.org, we call this water credit. And the numbers speak for themselves. Water credit brings together the tools of micro-level finance with the need for safe water and sanitation. We grant financial institutions philanthropic capital to build a portfolio of water and sanitation loans. At the household level, they source commercial and social impact capital to make the loans. By working with financial institutions around the world, we've leveraged $17 million in philanthropic capital to mobilize $280 million in commercial and social capital. Water credit has enabled households living at the base of the economic pyramid to take out 1.2 million small loans for a toilet or tap, reaching more than 5 million people. The loans have almost no defaults, with a global repayment rate of 99%. All this is done through a global network of 65 financial institution partners. So let me repeat that. $280 million catalyzed for water and sanitation access, more than 5 million people, 99% repayment, all with a $17 million philanthropic investment. So that's real leverage. And it's a new way of looking at financial solutions for water and sanitation access built on firsthand knowledge of the coping costs the poor pay every day. Those in need purchase water from vendors, spend time fetching and carrying water, and finding a place to relieve themselves. They bear the direct costs of health care resulting from the consumption of unsafe water and the economic cost of missing work and school due to waterborne illness. We all know that access to safe water and sanitation in and of itself is not directly income generating. However, we do know it can become income enabling. As part of recovering the coping costs, people recover time to work, start or expand a business enterprise. This in turn provides the income to pay off the loan and begin the climb out of poverty. Additionally, entering into the formal system means an increase in revenue from the tariffs households pay for the water service. At water.org, we've been singularly focused on ending the water crisis for more than 25 years. Putting financial tools and resources in the hands of those in need has transformed our work and is accelerating progress and impact. So to put this impact in perspective, it took water.org 22 years to reach 1 million people with our direct impact programs. In only 4 additional years, we've reached more than 5 million people by working through financial institutions. And this year alone, we're going to reach 2.4 million people, and we've expanded our partner network to include commercial banks, micro-utilities, and community-based organizations in South Asia, Southeast Asia, Africa, and Latin America. Water credit is working, it's scalable, and it proves that blending philanthropic and domestic commercial finance can help make a significant leap toward universal access to safe water and sanitation. Using targeted philanthropy to correct market failures at the base of the economic pyramid and tap into capital markets, we can unlock the ability to scale solutions and accelerate impact. We know that water.org alone will not solve the problem. We need our partners, the other civil society organizations, your ministries, and private finance to join together to increase efficiency in operations, set appropriate tariffs, and make finance affordable and accessible to those living at the base of the economic pyramid. In addition to investments in the top-down water infrastructure, I urge you to explore new paths like water credit to make capital accessible and affordable from the bottom up. And together we can solve the water and sanitation crisis by 2030, or as Dr. Kim says, well before that. Thank you very much.
We tried to recruit Matt to come work with us at the World Bank, but he says he has other things to do, so that was a great speech.
Well, let me thank all of our initial speakers for their inspiring comments. The work you're doing is so important, and we really appreciate this commitment.